My name is Olivia Mason, 28. And until last Thanksgiving, I thought family meant unconditional love. After 2 years away building my financial career in Chicago, I drove 6 hours to our small Ohio town, heart full of hope and trunk packed with gifts. When my father opened our door, his expression turned to stone. "We don't have a daughter. Please leave," he declared as my brother smirked behind him, my old room keys dangling from his fingers. Before I tell you how my own father disowned me at our family doorstep, let me know where you're watching from in the comments and hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you'll want to see how I turned this heartbreaking moment into the most empowering decision of my life. Growing up in Millfield, Ohio, meant everyone knew your business. Our family portrait hung in the living room like propaganda. Dad standing tall and serious. Mom seated with perfect posture, Ethan and me positioned precisely on either side. From the outside, we were the picture-perfect American family. Inside, our walls told a different story. My father, Robert Mason, ran our household like his construction company with rigid rules and high expectations. A tall man with perpetually sunburned forearms and calloused hands. He believed a woman's place was in the home, and a man's success was measured by his ability to provide. Mom Linda was the peacekeeper. Her gentle voice and warm brown eyes always ready to soothe Dad's frequent storms of disapproval. A Mason stands on their own 2 feet. Dad would say, though, this family motto seemed to apply differently to me than to my younger brother Ethan. While I washed dishes after dinner, Ethan would be excused to finish his homework or practice baseball. When I brought home straight A's, Dad would nod briefly when Ethan brought home keys with 1 A in physical education. Dad would clap him on the shoulder and say, "That's my boy." Mom noticed the disparity, but addressed it in whispers when Dad wasn't around. "Your father just shows love differently to each of you," she'd explain, smoothing my hair back. "He's harder on you because he knows you're strong like him." I didn't feel strong when Dad criticized my career ambitions. From the moment I won the state math competition in 8th grade, I knew I wanted to work in finance. I'd open savings accounts for my dolls, tracking their imaginary expenses and color-coded notebooks. "Numbers are clean," I told Mom once. "They don't play favorites or change the rules." Dad scoffed when I mentioned studying finance in college. "What's the point? You'll get married, have kids, and forget all about it. Better to find something practical you can do from home." Ethan, meanwhile, struggled with basic algebra, but excelled at reading our father. He knew exactly when to agree enthusiastically with Dad's opinions, when to ask for advice to make Dad feel important, and when to appear vulnerable enough to need rescuing. By 15, my brother had mastered the art of manipulation, presenting different versions of himself depending on who was watching. The summer before my senior year of high school, I received early acceptance letters from 3 universities. The local community college sent a modest envelope. Northwestern and the Yale University of Chicago sent impressive packets with glossy brochures. Dad saw me admiring the Chicago materials at the kitchen table. Or Chicago, he practically spat the word. "That's 400 miles away. What are you going to do in a big city all alone?" "Study finance," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "They have one of the best programs in the country. And who's going to pay for this fancy education?" His arms crossed over his chest, stance widening as if preparing for battle. "I applied for scholarships," I explained, "and financial aid. I've been saving from my library job to your money won't cover a fraction of those costs. Besides, your mother needs you here. I need you here." But I knew the truth. Mom had confided in me during one of our late-night talks that she dreamed of seeing me graduate from a prestigious university, something she never had the chance to do herself. She had whispered her support in the darkness of my bedroom, though she would never contradict Dad publicly. The argument about college became the first major fracture between my father and me. For weeks, tension filled our home like smoke. Mom tried mediating, suggesting compromises like starting at community college and transferring later. Ethan stayed strategically neutral in front of Dad, but taunted me privately. "You're never getting out of here," he said one night, leaning against my doorframe. "Dad's already planning to convert your room into his home office once you're married, off to some local guy." The day my full scholarship letter from Chicago arrived, I didn't tell anyone. I forged Dad's signature on the acceptance forms and mailed them back the next morning. I only revealed my decision at dinner 2 weeks before graduation. The silence after my announcement was deafening. Dad's face flushed crimson, his fist clenching around his fork until his knuckles whitened. Mom's eyes filled with tears, though I couldn't tell if they were of pride or fear. Ethan watched the scene unfold with keen interest, like a scientist observing an experiment. If you leave, Dad finally said, his voice dangerously quiet. Don't expect us to bail you out when you fail. I left for Chicago in August. Mom hugged me tightly before I got in my used Honda Civic, slipping an envelope with $300 into my pocket. Dad stood on the porch, arms crossed, refusing to help load my belongings or say goodbye. Ethan watched from the window, already measuring my room for his expanded gaming setup. That day, a piece of my heart stayed behind in Ohio, buried somewhere beneath the floorboards of my childhood home. But another part of me, a stronger, more determined part, faced forward toward Chicago and never looked back. Chicago embraced me like a long-lost friend. The city's energy matched my ambition. Its towering skyscrapers, housing the financial institutions I dreamed of joining. My dormitory roommate Jessica quickly became my first real friend, accepting me without the weight of hometown expectations. Your family sounds intense, she commented after hearing snippets of my background. But you're free now. You get to decide who you want to be. Those words became my mantra through 4 grueling years of study, while other students partied. I maintained a punishing schedule of classes, library sessions, and part-time jobs every day. On my transcript felt like vindication. Every dean's list of recognition was ammunition against Dad's prediction of failure. Communication with my family dwindled to occasional phone calls with Mom. She would speak in hushed tones, often cutting conversations short when Dad entered the room. Holidays became exercises in compromise. Thanksgiving at a classmate's home. Christmas reduced to a tense 48-hour visit where Dad and I circled each other like wary animals. Ethan dropped out of community college after 1 semester, claiming the professors didn't understand his learning style. He launched a series of business ventures, a lawn care service that folded after 3 months, a sports memorabilia website that attracted a cease and desist letter for selling counterfeit merchandise, a food truck that failed health inspection twice. After each failure, he'd return to our parents' home, and Dad would welcome him with open arms and open wallet. Your brother is trying to make something of himself, Mom explained during one of our calls. Your father respects that. He's staying close to home while he figures things out. I bit my tongue, knowing that pointing out the double standard would only hurt Mom. Instead, I channeled my frustration into my career. Upon graduation, I landed an entry-level position at a prestigious financial firm. My starting salary exceeded what my father earned after 30 years in construction. 2 years later, I was promoted to junior analyst. 4 years in, I made senior analyst, managing portfolios for clients with 8-figure net worths. I purchased a sleek condominium overlooking Lake Michigan, filled it with furniture I selected without anyone's approval, and painted the walls whatever colors I desired. I built a chosen family from colleagues and friends who valued my intelligence and determination. My boss, a sharp-witted woman in her 50s, became the mentor I'd always craved. My circle of friends included people from diverse backgrounds who expanded my worldview beyond the narrow confines of Millfield. Then on an ordinary Tuesday in my 5th year in Chicago, Mom called crying. The bank is taking the house, she sobbed. Your father's company lost their biggest contract, and we've fallen behind on payments. The foreclosure notice came today. My childhood home had never been a place of unmitigated happiness, but it was still where Mom lived, where her garden flourished in the backyard, where her handmade curtains framed the windows without thinking. I asked for the mortgage details. The next day, I contacted the bank and arranged to purchase the property. I used a substantial portion of my savings for the down payment and set up a dummy corporation as the official owner to keep my name off the paperwork. It was Mom's idea to keep the arrangement secret. Your father would never accept this kind of help from you, she explained. His pride wouldn't allow it. Let's just tell him the bank worked out a special refinancing plan. I agreed. Wanting to spare both Mom and Dad the humiliation, the house payments became another monthly expense in my budget. One I never regretted. Knowing Mom had security gave me peace. What I didn't anticipate was Ethan moving back home after his latest business failure. According to Mom's increasingly infrequent calls, he had taken over the basement as his entrepreneurial headquarters and was helping Dad with house maintenance. Our communications grew sparse, with Mom often mentioning she had to check her phone battery when I asked why she hadn't called. Then 3 years after I bought the house, Mom sent a text that pierced my carefully constructed independence. Please come home for Thanksgiving this year. I miss you terribly. We need to be a family again. I stared at those words for hours, emotions whirring within me. My logical mind listed all the reasons to decline the uncomfortable silence. Dad's disapproving glances, Ethan's thinly veiled insults. But my heart, that traitorous organ, leapt at the word family with embarrassing eagerness. After consulting with Jessica Now, my neighbor and closest confidant, I requested Thanksgiving week off from work. I shopped for thoughtful gifts, handcrafted leather wallet for Dad, gardening supplies for Mom, and even an expensive watch for Ethan as a peace offering. I packed my most conservative outfits. Nothing too big city that might trigger Dad's criticism. The drive from Chicago to Millfield felt both endless and too short. Each mile marker counted down to a reunion I both craved and dreaded. The Ohio landscape rolled past my window, farms giving way to familiar small towns. Fall had painted the trees in fiery colors, their leaves carpeting the ground in orange and gold. As I turned onto Maple Street, my stomach clenched. The neighborhood looked smaller than I remembered the houses, more weathered children's bicycles, and forgotten toys littered front yards. Mrs. Patterson's elaborate Thanksgiving decorations still dominated her porch, pilgrims and turkeys competing for attention. I parked in front of my childhood home, taking deep breaths to steady myself. The house looked different somehow. Dad had painted the shutters a new color, and the porch railing had been replaced. A strange car sat in the driveway next to Dad's pickup truck. For a moment, I considered starting my car again and driving straight back to Chicago. Instead, I grabbed my overnight bag and the gift-wrapped packages plastered on my most confident smile and walked up the familiar cracked sidewalk to face my family after 2 years of absence. My heels clicked against the concrete path leading to our front door. I had chosen my outfit carefully that morning. A burgundy sweater and tailored black pants. Professional but not flashy. My hair was swept into a neat bun, pearl earrings catching the weak November sunlight. I wanted to appear successful but not boastful, put together but not pretentious. The front yard looked different from my memories. Dad's meticulous lawn had grown patchy with brown spots marring the once perfect grass. Mom's cherished rose bushes had been removed, replaced with low-maintenance shrubs that required little attention. A large television satellite dish now dominated one side of the roof, an eyesore Mom would never have approved in the past. More jarring were the unfamiliar wind chimes hanging from the porch ceiling, their discordant melody nothing like the gentle tinkling of Mom's favorite copper bells. The welcome mat, once hand-painted by Mom with cheerful sunflowers, had been replaced by a generic one, bearing the Mason family name in bold black letters. These small changes accumulated into a sensation of wrongness, as if I were approaching a house that merely resembled my childhood home rather than the actual place. Still, I squared my shoulders and pressed the doorbell, wincing at the unfamiliar electronic tone that replaced our old mechanical chime. Footsteps approached from inside, heavy, deliberate steps that I recognized as my father's distinctive gait. The curtain on the adjacent window twitched aside briefly, and I caught a glimpse of movement before the fabric fell back into place. The lock clicked, and the door swung open. Dad stood framed in the doorway, his 6-foot frame blocking my view of the interior. He had aged since I'd last seen him, his once salt and pepper hair now almost completely gray. Deep lines bracketed his mouth and etched his forehead. He wore his standard uniform of flannel shirt and worn jeans, a coffee stain visible near the collar. What struck me most was his expression. There was no surprise, no warmth, not even the disappointment I had braced myself for. Instead, his face might have been carved from stone eyes, cold and distant, as if regarding a stranger. "Dad." I began my carefully rehearsed greeting, dying on my lips as I registered his complete lack of welcome. "We don't have a daughter," he said, his voice flat and emotionless. "Please leave." The words hit me with physical force. I actually stepped back, my heel catching on the edge of the porch step. The gift bags dangled uselessly from my suddenly numb fingers. What I managed certain I had misheard. He didn't repeat himself. He didn't need to. His eyes so similar to mine in color, but utterly devoid of recognition, that everything movement behind him caught my attention. Ethan appeared at Dad's shoulder, several inches shorter, but with the same broad build. Unlike Dad, his face wasn't emotionless. A smirk played at the corners of his mouth, a gleam of triumph in his eyes that sent ice through my veins. Most disturbing was what dangled from his finger, a keychain with a distinctive purple butterfly charm that Mom had given me on my 16th birthday. Attached to it was the key to my childhood bedroom. "Sorry you came all this way for nothing," Ethan said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "But we've moved on. Family's smaller now, but stronger. I looked past them into the hallway searching for Mom. The house beyond seemed dark shadows masking any movement. There was no sign of her, no call of greeting, no rushing forward to intervene as she had done so many times during family conflicts. "Where's Mom?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. "Not your concern anymore," Dad replied. The reality of the situation crashed over me in waves. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a momentary anger that would dissolve with explanation. This was a calculated rejection planned and prepared for. They had been waiting for me, ready to deliver this blow. "Can I at least talk to Mom?" I persisted, clinging to the one relationship I thought remained intact. "Linda doesn't want to see you," Dad said, using Mom's first name as if to emphasize my exclusion from the family unit. "You abandoned this family years ago. You think your fancy Chicago job and big city apartment make you better than us. We don't need your charity or your condescension." Ethan stepped forward, pushing the door wider behind him. I caught a glimpse of the hallway leading to the bedrooms. The family photos that once lined the wall had been rearranged. Pictures containing me had been removed, leaving conspicuous empty spaces in the arrangement. More shocking was the open door to my old bedroom. From my position, I could see it had been completely transformed. The blue walls I had loved were now painted a dark green. My desk had been replaced by weightlifting equipment. A massive gaming setup dominated the space where my bed once stood. "Like what I've done with the place?" Ethan asked, noticing my gaze. "I needed the space for my business's data, and I set it up. Last year, after we realized you weren't part of this family anymore. Last year, they had erased me from their lives long before this moment. While I had been dutifully making mortgage payments, sending birthday cards that went unacknowledged, and missing the family I thought I still had, they had been systematically removing all traces of my existence." A strange calm settled over me. The initial shock dissolved, replaced by a clarity I hadn't expected. Years of therapy had taught me that some rejections are actually redirections. This moment, painful as it was, offered a fork in the road. I could beg for acceptance from people who had already decided to exclude me, or I could stand in my truth. "I understand," I said, my voice steady. "Thank you for making your position clear." Dad blinked, clearly expecting tears or arguments. Ethan's smirk faltered. I set the gift bags gently on the porch. Then I reached into my handbag and withdrew my phone. Dad's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "What are you doing?" he demanded. "Something I should have done a long time ago," I replied, scrolling through my contacts. "I'm calling the bank." 3 years earlier, I had been working late at my office in downtown Chicago when Mom's frantic call came through. Her voice had been raw from crying as she explained that the bank was foreclosing on their house due to missed payments. Dad's construction company had lost its biggest client after a dispute, and they were 6 months behind on the mortgage. "He won't tell anyone," she whispered. "He's too proud, but we'll be homeless in 30 days if something doesn't change." That night, I contacted my financial advisor and liquidated a significant portion of my investment portfolio. The next morning, I called the bank holding my parents' mortgage and arranged a meeting. Being in the financial industry gave me insight into how these transactions worked and what options were available. I created a limited liability company that would purchase the house outright with the stipulation that my parents could continue living there indefinitely. The paperwork was complex, designed to hide my involvement at Mom's insistence. "Your father would never accept this kind of help from you," she had explained during one of our hushed phone conversations. "It would destroy what's left of his pride. Please, let's keep this between us." I had agreed, not wanting to humiliate Dad or damage their marriage. I even arranged for the bank to send a letter claiming they had worked out a special refinancing arrangement based on Dad's years of prior timely payments. Mom had called me sobbing with relief when Dad showed her the letter, proud that his good name had saved their home. Now standing on the porch with my father's rejection still ringing in my ears, I dialed the number for my contact at the bank. "Hello, this is Olivia Mason," I said when the call connected, maintaining eye contact with my father. "I need to confirm some details about the property at 487 Maple Street in Millfield, Ohio." Dad's expression shifted from dismissive to confused. Ethan stepped forward, attempting to hear my conversation. "Yes, that's correct. Mason Family Holdings LLC is the current owner." I continued, keeping my voice professional and calm. "I'd like to verify that my name is the only one on the ownership documents." The color drained from Dad's face as comprehension dawned. Ethan grabbed his arm, whispering urgently. "She's bluffing," he hissed loud enough for me to hear. "Hang up now." I put the call on speakerphone. Could you please confirm who has been making the mortgage payments for the past 3 years? That would be you, miss. Mason, the banker replied. All payments have come from your personal account in Chicago since you purchased the property in November 2020. Thank you, I said, ending the call and returning the phone to my purse. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath as the truth settled around us, like snow. Dad's face underwent a remarkable transformation. The cold rejection melted away, replaced by shock, then confusion, and finally the dawning horror of understanding. He gripped the doorframe for support, his knuckles whitening under pressure. You, he finally managed. You bought the house. Yes, I replied simply, but the bank said. His voice trailed off as he processed the implications. The refinancing plan. There was no refinancing plan, Dad. The bank was foreclosing. You were 30 days from eviction. I bought the house so you and Mom wouldn't be homeless. Ethan's face had turned an alarming shade of red. His confident swagger evaporated as he realized the ground beneath his feet quite literally belonged to me. You're lying, he spluttered. This is some kind of sick joke. It's not a joke, came a new voice from inside the house. I looked past Dad to see Mom standing in the hallway. She looked thinner than I remembered, her shoulders hunched forward as if carrying a great weight. Her hair had more gray than the last time I'd seen her, and dark circles shadowed her eyes. But her voice, despite its softness, held a newfound strength. Olivia saved our home, she continued, stepping forward. I asked her not to tell you, Robert. I knew your pride wouldn't accept help from her. Dad turned to stare at Mom as if seeing a stranger you knew all this time. She nodded, tears filling her eyes. I couldn't let us lose everything, and Olivia was kind enough to keep it quiet to protect your feelings. Movement across the street caught my attention. Mrs. Patterson stood on her porch watching our family drama unfold with unconcealed interest. Next door, the Hendersons had paused their yard work to observe. Our private moment was becoming neighborhood entertainment. We should continue this inside, I suggested, gesturing to our audience. Dad stepped back automatically, allowing me to enter my own property for the first time in years. The interior smelled different, a masculine combination of pizza and sports equipment that had replaced Mom's usual scent of lemon polish and cinnamon. The living room furniture had been rearranged. Mom's carefully selected decor items replaced with Ethan's sports memorabilia and gaming trophies. Most painful was the wall of family photos, as I'd glimpsed from outside. All images containing me had been removed. The gaps left behind were like missing teeth in a smile obvious and disturbing. Where are my pictures? I asked quietly. Mom looked at the floor. Ethan took them down last Christmas, he said. He said seeing you hurt. His eyes and you allowed it. I turned to Dad. He had the grace to look uncomfortable but offered no apology. Sit down, all of you, I said, taking control of the situation. We need to talk about what's been happening here. Ethan remained standing, his posture defensive. You can't just waltz in here and start giving orders. Actually, I can, I replied evenly. This is my house. I've been paying the mortgage for 3 years while you've been living here rent-free. So yes, I think I've earned the right to ask questions. Mom opened a drawer in the side table and pulled out a stack of envelopes. These came for you, she said, holding them out with trembling hands. I found them hidden in Ethan's room last week when I was cleaning. I took the envelopes, recognizing my own handwriting, birthday cards, Christmas cards, notes I had sent to Mom over the past 2 years that she apparently never received. You intercepted my mail, I asked, Ethan, disbelief coloring my voice. You weren't part of this family anymore, he replied, but his defiance had a hollow quality. Now you left us. I left for college, I corrected. I never left the family. I call Mom every Sunday, or at least I tried to. Mom's eyes widened. You haven't called in months. I've called every week. I insisted the calls go to voicemail. My texts show as delivered but unanswered. Understanding dawned in Mom's eyes. She turned to Ethan, her expression hardening. What did you do to my phone? Ethan shrugged, but I could see panic building behind his nonchalant facade. I upgraded your phone plan. Must have been some technical glitch. It wasn't a glitch, I said, pulling out my phone again. Show me your phone, Mom. She handed it over without hesitation. A few minutes of inspection confirmed my suspicion. Ethan had installed an app that filtered incoming calls and texts, blocking my number, while making it appear that my attempts at communication never happened. He told us you wanted nothing to do with us anymore. Mom said, her voice breaking, that you were too busy with your fancy Chicago life to care about family. And you believed him? I asked her, evident in my voice. No, she whispered. Not really. But Robert did, and Ethan kept showing us social media posts of you at parties and restaurants, saying you were spending money on yourself while we struggled. Social media posts I was tagged in by colleagues. I clarified work functions and professional events, not wild partying. Dad had sat silently through this exchange, but now he stirred the house transfer papers. I signed them, but they didn't say anything about you being the buyer. I nodded. The LLC name deliberately obscured my involvement, again to protect your pride, and the letter from the bank about the refinancing plan. A fiction to make you feel better. He absorbed this, his weathered face revealing the internal struggle between gratitude and humiliation for a man who built his identity on being the provider. Discovering his daughter had secretly saved the family home was both relief and devastating blow. Ethan, sensing the momentum shifting against him, tried a new tactic. She's just trying to control us, he insisted. Make us dependent on her. She's always been jealous of me, of my relationship with you, Dad. Dad looked at his son with new eyes, really seeing him perhaps for the first time. Why would your sister be jealous of you? He asked slowly. She's successful, independent. She apparently has enough money to buy a house outright while supporting herself in Chicago. Because you always loved me more, Ethan blurted, his careful manipulation fracturing under pressure. She couldn't stand that I was your favorite. The room fell silent again. Mom looked as if she might be sick. Dad's expression was unreadable. Is that true? I asked quietly. Was he your favorite? My father couldn't meet my eyes. In his silence, I found my answer. The living room felt impossibly small, as decades of unspoken truths pressed against the walls. The grandfather clock in the corner, a wedding gift to my parents from my maternal grandparents, ticked loudly in the silence outside. A car drove past its radio, momentarily filling the void with a cheerful Thanksgiving commercial jingle that felt jarringly out of place. Maybe we should move this conversation to the kitchen. Mom suggested, her peacemaking instincts kicking in. I can make coffee. No, I said firmly. I think we need to stay right here and finish this. I placed the stack of intercepted cards on the coffee table, spreading them out like evidence at a trial. I never abandoned this family. I sent cards for every birthday, every holiday. I called weekly. I texted almost daily. When you stopped responding, I assumed you were busy or upset. But I never stopped trying. Dad picked up one of the envelopes, examining his name, written in my familiar handwriting. I never saw these because Ethan made sure you didn't, I said. Just like he made sure you didn't see the truth about the house. Ethan paced the living room like a caged animal, increasingly desperate as his carefully constructed narrative unraveled. Dad, she's twisting everything. She left us. She thinks she's better than us with her big city job and fancy degree. Is that why you told them I abandoned the family? I asked. Because I left Millfield, because I pursued my education and career. You did abandon us, he shouted, mask slipping completely. Now, you were supposed to stay here, get married, have kids. That was the plan. But you had to be different. Had to prove you were special. There was never any plan for my life, except the one I made for myself. I replied, maintaining my composure despite his escalating anger. And I never claimed to be special. I just wanted opportunities. Opportunities, he sneered. Like the opportunity to look down on us. To make Dad feel like a failure because he couldn't afford your college. To make Mom feel trapped in this small town. Ethan. Mom interrupted, her voice sharper than I'd ever heard it. Stop putting words in my mouth. I've never felt trapped because of Olivia's success. I felt proud. Dad stood abruptly, moving to a cabinet in the corner. He unlocked it with a key from his pocket and pulled out a folder. I need to see those ownership papers again, he muttered. Robert. What are you doing? Mom asked, concerned, lacing her voice. Checking something, he replied grimly. He spread several documents on the dining table, comparing them to something on his phone. His expression darkened as he read. These aren't the same. I moved to the table, examining the papers. They appeared to be transfer documents for the house, but the details were subtly different from the ones I had signed. The LLC name was correct, but several clauses had been altered. These are forgeries, I said after careful examination. Good ones, but definitely not the original documents. Dad's gaze shifted to Ethan, who had gone very still. Son, what do you know about this? Ethan's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. It's just some paperwork. Nothing important. It's fraud, I corrected. Altering legal documents is a felony. The room temperature seemed to drop several degrees as the implications sank in. Dad's face hardened as he looked at his son with growing suspicion. "Why would you forge these papers, Ethan?" he asked quietly. Ethan's composure cracked entirely. "Because I needed to fix things. We were going to lose everything because of your stupid pride. You wouldn't take a loan, wouldn't accept help, wouldn't listen to reason. Someone had to do something, so you forged transfer documents." Dad pressed to what end? An uncomfortable realization dawned on me. "You were planning to sell the house," I said, the pieces suddenly fitting together. "These forgeries put your name on the ownership documents instead of the LLC. You were going to sell it out from under Mom and Dad." Ethan's silence confirmed my suspicion. "Is this true?" Mom whispered, her face pale with shock. "I had debts." Ethan finally admitted, his voice barely audible. "Serious debts? The cryptocurrency investment went bad. Really bad? And then there were the loans for the food truck and the online poker gambling debts." Dad supplied, his voice hollow with disappointment. "How much?" "Around 80,000, Ethan mumbled. The amount hung in the air like a noxious gas. $80,000, more than Dad made in a year, more than the family had ever possessed at one time. "So you were going to sell our home?" Mom asked, tears streaming down her face. "Where would we have gone? I had it all figured out." Ethan insisted, a desperate edge to his voice. "We downsized to an apartment just temporarily. Once I paid off the debts, my new business would take off. We'd buy a nicer place." "What new business?" Dad asked warily. "Sports memorabilia, authentication. I have connections now, real ones. The same business that had gotten him in legal trouble 3 years ago," I noted silently. "And when were you planning to sell?" I asked. Ethan wouldn't meet my eyes. The paperwork was almost ready. "Another month, maybe less." "Right after Thanksgiving," I translated. "You were going to wait until the holiday was over, then sell the house before Christmas." A knock at the door interrupted the tense conversation. Dad opened it to reveal Sheriff Jim Taylor, a family friend since my childhood. His expression was grave as he took in the scene before him. "Everything all right here, Robert?" he asked, though his eyes were fixed on me. "Mrs. Patterson called saying there might be a disturbance." "No disturbance," Dad began, but I stepped forward. "Actually, Sheriff Taylor, we've discovered some concerning documents," I said professionally, "possibly fraudulent property transfer papers." The sheriff's eyebrows rose as recognition dawned in his eyes. "Olivia Mason. Well, I'll be. Haven't seen you in years." He turned to Dad. "Didn't know your daughter was visiting for Thanksgiving." "Neither did I," Dad muttered. Sheriff Taylor's confusion was evident, but he focused on my statement. "Fraudulent documents, you say?" Ethan made a sudden move toward the back door, but Dad caught his arm in a vice-like grip. "No, son. You're staying right here to face this." Face what Ethan challenged, though. His bravado was clearly forced. "It's just a family misunderstanding." "Fraud isn't a misunderstanding," Sheriff Taylor said mildly. "Neither is theft of mail, if what I overheard is correct." Mom stepped forward, maternal instinct overriding her shock and disappointment. "Jim, please. It's Thanksgiving tomorrow. Can't we handle this as a family first?" The sheriff hesitated. Decades of friendship with my parents warring with professional duty. Finally, he nodded. "Robert, Linda, I've known you both forever. I trust you'll contact me if you decide to pursue this officially." He turned to Ethan, his expression hardening. "And you, young man, might want to think very carefully about your next moves." After Sheriff Taylor left, an uncomfortable silence settled over the living room again. The family photos, with their conspicuous gaps, seemed to watch us accusingly from the wall. The house itself felt like a fifth presence in the room, its very ownership now the catalyst for unraveling decades of family dynamics. Ethan slumped onto the couch, defeated. "What happens now?" he asked, not looking at any of us. I surveyed the wreckage of what I had once called family. My father, aging and confused, caught between anger and shame. My mother, exhausted by years of peace, keeping her loyalty divided, and abused my brother, corrupted by entitlement and desperation, and myself, successful but alone, standing in the home I owned but had never been allowed to belong in. The question hung between us. What happens now? The ticking of the grandfather clock marked the passing seconds as we all stood frozen in our respective positions. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the windows, painting diagonal lines across the living room carpet. The moment stretched taut with unspoken thoughts and potential paths. I could have called Sheriff Taylor back. I had evidence of Ethan's fraud, his mail theft, his betrayal. I could have pressed charges, watched him face legal consequences, perhaps even serve time. The vindictive part of me, the child who had always felt less favored, whispered that he deserved no less. I could have evicted them all. The house was legally mine. I could have given them 30 days' notice and walked away, letting them face the consequences of their choices and Ethan's actions. The wounded part of me, fresh from rejection at my own family's door, argued this would be justified. But standing there watching my family's foundation crumble in real time, I realized neither option would bring healing. Revenge might satisfy momentarily, but would leave permanent scars. Walking away would merely perpetuate the cycle of abandonment that had defined our family for years. What happens now, I said finally, is up to us, all of us. I moved to sit in the armchair opposite the couch, deliberately choosing a position that put me at eye level with everyone else, rather than standing over them. Let me be clear about a few things. I continued, keeping my voice steady and free of accusation. First, I never abandoned this family. I left for college, built a career, and continued reaching out despite increasing silence from all of you. Mom nodded, wiping tears from her cheeks. Dad stared at his hands, unable or unwilling to meet my eyes. Ethan remained motionless, gaze fixed on the floor. Second, I purchased this house 3 years ago to provide security for Mom and Dad. Not as a power play, not to control anyone, but because I care. The secrecy was Mom's idea to protect Dad's pride, though in hindsight, perhaps honesty would have served us better. Dad's head jerked up at this, a flash of indignation crossing his features, before fading into reluctant acknowledgement. Third, what Ethan did was wrong legally and morally wrong. Intercepting mail lying about my communications, attempting to forge property documents, to sell a house that isn't his, to sell. These are serious offenses that have caused real harm to this family. Ethan's shoulders hunched further, making him appear smaller than his actual size. But fourth, and most importantly, we have a choice right now. We can let this moment destroy what's left of our family, or we can use it as an opportunity to rebuild something healthier. How exactly do we do that? Dad asked, speaking directly to me for the first time, without anger or dismissal. We start with truth, I replied. No more secrets, no more manipulation, no more unspoken resentments and Ethan's doubts. Mom asked quietly the people he owes money to. They might not be patient. I had suspected as much. $80,000 in gambling debts likely didn't come from legitimate casinos with payment plans, but from less savory sources. I'll handle the debts, I said after a moment's consideration. Ethan's head snapped up, disbelief written across his features. Why would you do that after everything? Not for you, I clarified. For Mom. Safety and peace of mind. But there will be conditions. I outlined my terms clearly. Ethan would move out of the house immediately. He would enter a gambling addiction program. He would find legitimate employment and begin repaying me, even if it took years. Most importantly, he would have no access to family finances or legal documents ever again. As for the house, I continued, Mom and Dad can continue living here, but with formal rental agreement, a nominal amount just enough to establish legal boundaries and responsibilities. You're charging us rent? Dad asked, old pride flaring briefly. $1 per month, I specified. It's about establishing clear terms, Dad, not about money. He considered this, then gave a short nod of acceptance in our relationship. Mom asked the question that mattered most, hanging between us. I took a deep breath, searching for words that would be both honest and healing. That will take time to rebuild. Trust has been broken on all sides, but I'm willing to try, if you are. Mom crossed the room and embraced me for the first time in years. The familiar scent of her perfume brought a rush of memories. Bedtime stories, baking cookies, whispered encouragements. For a moment, I was a child again, safe in the circle of her arms. I never stopped loving you, she whispered against my hair. Never, no matter what you were told. Dad remained seated, emotion warring on his face. Decades of rigid masculinity had left him without tools to navigate this vulnerability, but he cleared his throat and managed 5 words. I had never expected to hear from him. I'm sorry I failed you. It wasn't a perfect apology. It didn't address the years of favoritism, the cold rejection at the door, the willing belief that I had abandoned the family. But it was a beginning, an acknowledgement of his role in our fractured relationship. Ethan alone remained apart, his expression a complex mixture of shame, resentment, and fear. So that's it. You swoop in like some fairy godmother solving everyone's problems, and we're supposed to be grateful. No, I replied evenly. You're supposed to be accountable. Gratitude can come later, if at all. He flinched at my directness, unused to being held responsible rather than coddled. For perhaps the first time in his adult life, Ethan was facing consequences he couldn't charm or manipulate his way out of. "I don't have anywhere to go," he said finally, a note of genuine panic in his voice. "I've arranged a room at the Millfield Inn for tonight," I replied, having texted the arrangement while Mom embraced me. "Tomorrow we can discuss longer-term options, but you can't stay here." The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Ethan packed essentials under Dad's watchful eye, his gaming equipment and sports memorabilia left behind. I drove him to the inn, personally maintaining a professional distance during the silent journey. "Why are you really doing this?" he asked as I handed him the room key. "You could have had me arrested. You could have taken everything because revenge doesn't heal anything." I answered honestly, and despite everything, "You're still my brother." I left him standing in the hotel parking lot, a solitary figure with a duffel bag and a lot to think about. When I returned to the house, Mom had prepared a simple dinner, not the elaborate Thanksgiving feast she had likely planned, but soup and sandwiches served at the kitchen table, where we had shared thousands of meals and more innocent times. I called the Harvest Table restaurant in town. I informed them as we ate. They had a last-minute cancellation for tomorrow at 1 Hutterall. I reserved it for us Thanksgiving at a restaurant. Dad questioned traditional values momentarily, overriding our new reality. "A neutral location," I explained. "Somewhere we can begin again without the weight of this house and its history pressing down on us." He considered this, then nodded, smart thinking. We ate mostly in silence, the events of the day too monumental to process through casual conversation. But it wasn't the hostile silence of my previous visits charged with unspoken resentments. This silence felt cleansing, like the quiet after a storm has passed, when the world is still dripping and damaged, but the thunder has ceased. After dinner, Mom showed me to the guest room, Ethan's recent occupancy evident in the hastily changed sheets and lingering scent of his cologne. She hovered in the doorway, clearly wanting to say more, but unsure how to begin. "It's okay, Mom," I assured her. "We don't have to fix everything tonight. I should have been stronger," she said, voice thick with regret. "Should have stood up to both of them, told you the truth about the house." "We all made choices," I replied, "some better than others, but we're here now." She embraced me again before leaving this hug longer and fiercer than the first. As if trying to compress years of missed embraces into one moment alone in the unfamiliar guest room, I messaged Jessica to update her on the situation, her supportive responses providing a lifeline to my real life in Chicago. Then I opened my laptop to check work emails, the familiar routine grounding me after the emotional upheaval of the day. A soft knock interrupted my work. Dad stood awkwardly in the hallway holding 2 mugs of hot chocolate, a peace offering from my childhood. He had made it the same way he always had, with extra marshmallows floating on top, the way I had loved it at 8 years old. "Can we talk?" he asked, the question costing him visible effort. I accepted the mug and gestured for him to enter. He perched uncomfortably on the edge of the desk chair while I sat cross-legged on the bed, an unconscious recreation of our positions during rare father-daughter talks. "In my youth, I was wrong today." He began staring into his mug rather than at me, wrong about a lot of things for a long time. I remained silent, giving him space to find his words. "You asked if Ethan was my favorite," he continued, voice rough with emotion. "The truth is, you reminded me too much of myself. Stubborn, smart, determined to carve your own path. I pushed against you because I saw my own weaknesses in your strengths. It wasn't the whole explanation. It couldn't account for years of unequal treatment, but it was more self-awareness than I had ever witnessed from my father. I'm still angry," I admitted. "That won't disappear overnight." He nodded, accepting this truth. "Will you tell me about your life in Chicago? Your real life, not what Ethan made up." So I did. I told him about my apartment overlooking the lake, my promotion last year, the mentorship program I had started for young women in finance. I showed him photos of my friends, my volunteer work, the half marathon I had completed in the spring. He listened without interruption, occasionally asking questions that revealed genuine interest rather than judgment. When I finished, he sat quietly for a moment, processing everything he had missed. "You built a good life," he said finally, "without any help from me. I would have welcomed your support." I replied honestly, "But yes, I did. I'm proud of you," he said. The words, clearly unfamiliar on his tongue, should have told you that a long time ago. It wasn't everything I had ever wanted to hear from him. It didn't erase the pain or heal the wounds of rejection, But as we sat drinking hot chocolate in a guest room that smelled faintly of my brother's cologne, it felt like the beginning of something new. Not a perfect reconciliation, but a turning away from old patterns towards something potentially healthier. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. There would be awkward moments at the restaurant, Thanksgiving, difficult conversations about Ethan's future, legal documents to correct, and years of misunderstandings to address. The road to healing would be neither straight nor smooth, but for the first time in years, it felt possible. Not because I had forced my family to accept me, or because I had wielded my financial power to demand respect, but because truth, however painful, had finally broken through the walls of silence and deception that had isolated us from each other. As Dad left with a gruff goodnight, I realized that in losing the family I thought I had, I might eventually gain the family we could become. The house that had been the battleground today could transform into neutral territory tomorrow. Then perhaps a genuine home again someday. It wasn't the Thanksgiving homecoming I had imagined, but perhaps it was the one we all needed. 6 months have passed since that fateful Thanksgiving day when I stood rejected on my own doorstep. Spring has painted Millfield in shades of green and pink cherry blossoms framing the streets where I once rode my bicycle as a child. I sit on the porch swing of my childhood home, watching as Dad carefully prunes Mom's newly replanted rose bushes. He consults a gardening book between cuts, his methodical approach both familiar and new. The man who once claimed gardening was women's work now talks about soil pH and proper mulching techniques with surprising enthusiasm. So much has changed since that cold November day when truth burst through our family's carefully constructed facade. The changes weren't immediate or easy, but they were necessary, like setting a broken bone so it can heal properly instead of painfully misaligned. Dad enrolled in therapy the week after Thanksgiving, his decision shocking everyone who knew Robert Mason as the epitome of old-school masculinity. Can't fix what you don't understand, he explained simply, when neighbors raised eyebrows. 12 sessions later, he still struggles with vulnerability, still occasionally falls into old patterns of communication. But he's learning. We both are. The change most visible to outsiders is his relationship with Mom. She stands straighter now, speaks more freely. Their marriage has shifted from his dictatorship to something resembling partnership. Yesterday, I overheard them discussing vacation plans. Mom firmly advocating for the beach she's always loved rather than the fishing cabin Dad preferred. More surprising, he listened. "Your mother deserves to be heard," he told me later. Your admission clearly still uncomfortable but genuine. Been drowning out her voice for 40 years. Time to shut up and listen for a change. Mom has found her independence in small but significant ways. She joined a book club that meets weekly at the local library. She reopened the Etsy shop the Dad once dismissed as a hobby, selling her hand-knitted scarves and hats to customers across the country. She speaks up during family discussions, rather than deferring automatically to Dad's opinions. Most meaningful to me, she calls regularly, without fear or secrecy. Our Sunday conversations have become a ritual we both cherish, no longer conducted in whispers, or cut short when Dad enters the room. Last month, she visited me in Chicago for a long weekend. Her first trip to see my life there, watching her marvel at the lakefront view from my apartment. Proudly wearing the dress I bought her at a boutique on Michigan Avenue, felt like reclaiming something precious we had both lost. As for Ethan, his journey has been more complicated. The initial months were rough, his resentment and entitlement deeply ingrained. He bounced between temporary accommodations called Dad, with melodramatic tales of hardship, and tested every boundary we established. Twice he relapsed into gambling, draining the small account I had set up for his living expenses. The turning point came in March, when his latest manipulation attempt backfired spectacularly. He had told a local business owner that Dad was backing his new venture financially, leading to contracts being signed on false pretenses. When Dad not only refused to cover the resulting debts, but also informed the business owner of Ethan's deception, my brother faced a harsh reality check. "Nobody's buying your act anymore," Dad told him bluntly. "Time to grow up and be a man." Those words from the father who had enabled him for decades finally penetrated Ethan's defensive shell. He checked himself into a 30-day program for gambling addiction, and upon release found legitimate work at a warehouse outside town. It's not glamorous, but it's honest. Each month, a small payment appears in my account, his debt gradually diminishing through genuine effort, rather than quick schemes. Our relationship remains distant but civil. I don't expect us to ever be close. Too much damage exists between us. But last week he returned the purple butterfly keychain he had so smugly dangled before me on Thanksgiving. The small gesture delivered without drama or expectation suggests growth I hadn't thought possible. The house itself has transformed alongside of our family dynamics. I transferred ownership to a proper family trust, transparent and legal. That protects both my investment and my parents' right to live there indefinitely. The formal rental agreement remains $1 monthly, which Dad insists on paying in person. A ritual that acknowledges both his dignity and our new honesty. My old bedroom has been restored. Ethan's weights and gaming equipment relocated to a storage unit. He now pays for himself. The blue walls have returned along with bookshelves holding volumes from my childhood. It's not the shrine to adolescence it once was, but rather a comfortable guest room that welcomes me during my now regular visits. Most significantly, the family photos have been hung, the conspicuous gaps filled with images that tell our complete story, including the difficult chapters. My college graduation photo sits alongside Ethan's high school baseball team picture. My parents' wedding portrait hangs beside a recent image of all four of us at Easter dinner, our smiles tentative but genuine. Professionally, this period of family reconciliation coincided with unexpected career growth. The boundary-setting skills I developed through family therapy translated to greater confidence in the workplace. 2 months ago, I received a promotion to portfolio manager, the youngest in my firm's history. My boss noted that my authentic leadership style and emotional intelligence set me apart from colleagues with similar technical qualifications. Sometimes our deepest wounds become our greatest strengths. My therapist observed when I shared this news, your family experience taught you to recognize unhealthy dynamics and address them directly, rather than accommodating or avoiding them. This truth resonates deeply with me. The pain of being rejected at my own doorstep, of discovering years of deception and manipulation, initially felt like wounds that would never heal. Yet those very experiences forced me to develop resilience, discernment, and communication skills that now serve me in every relationship, personal and professional. The most profound lesson from this journey is that family is both a gift and a choice. The biological connections we're born with provide a starting point, but healthy relationships require active maintenance and sometimes difficult reinvention. Love without boundaries isn't really love at all, but rather a permission slip for dysfunction. Financial independence gave me the practical freedom to establish boundaries, but emotional independence gave me the strength to enforce them. I no longer measure my worth through my family's approval or disapproval. I can love them authentically while still protecting my own well-being. Dad joins me on the porch swing, wiping gardening soil from his hands with a rag. We sit in companionable silence for a few moments, watching as a neighbor's child rides past on a bicycle, adorned with streamers. "Never thought we'd get here," he says finally, gesturing vaguely to encompass not just the physical property, but the emotional territory we've navigated. "Where exactly is here?" I ask, genuinely curious about his perspective. He considers this taking the question seriously, rather than dismissing it as he once would have. A place where I can be wrong without feeling worthless, where we can disagree without destroying each other, where the past doesn't control the future. His words, more eloquent than I would have expected from the father of my childhood, remind me that we are all capable of growth at any age. The man who once rejected me at the door now welcomes not just my presence, but my truth, not perfectly, not without occasional backsliding, but consistently enough to build something new from the ruins of what was lost. As we sit watching the sunset paint the neighborhood in golden light, I reflect on the strange journey that brought us here, how rejection led to revelation, how pain preceded healing, how losing my illusion of family allowed me to gain something more authentic. The house keys now resting in my pocket symbolize not just property ownership, but the unlocking of truths long hidden. The journey continues. Of course, real healing isn't a destination, but a direction. A commitment to moving forward, even when the path grows steep or unclear. Some days are easier than others. Some conversations still activate old wounds. But we keep walking one step at a time toward a future defined by choice rather than obligation, by truth rather than appearance. For those of you who have faced similar family fractures, who have stood on your own doorsteps and felt unwelcome in spaces that should have been safe, I hope my story offers something of value. Perhaps it's permission to establish necessary boundaries, or courage to speak long-buried truths, or simply the knowledge that you're not alone in navigating complex family dynamics. Have you experienced moments where rejection ultimately led to greater authenticity in your relationships? How have you balanced maintaining boundaries with offering forgiveness? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please subscribe and hit that like button. Your support helps me continue sharing these difficult but important conversations about family healing and finding strength through our most painful experiences. Thank you for walking this path with me today. And remember that sometimes our greatest power emerges precisely when we feel most powerless.